ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll have one little bit more of bad news to get out first of what they do. This is election fraud. Election fraud. So, in the election in 2024, in July, that would have been my 5th election. They would have you believe that my vote, despite being one of the highest profile MPs in Parliament, someone who always stood up for North West Leicestershire, you've already heard about the economic and social benefits I and my team had delivered for the constituency, which everyone accepts. Apparently my vote dropped from 63% to 3% at the election. Despite the fact that I had more people on the ground delivering leaflets, the response on the doorsteps was fantastic. And what we're going to play now is going to play my election address. This is what I put out. This is my message to my constituents in 2024. That's Ashby de Bazouche, by the way. Hello, my friends. This election is not about Conservative or Labour. It's not about right or left. It's about right or wrong. To go to war with your own government over HS2 when you know the project will harm your people, that is right. So that's what I did. To believe Michael and Susan Rudkin, the former Ibstock sub-postmaster, and his wife, who brought me an unlikely tale of a dodgy computer system framing Susan for theft. To fight for Susan for 14 years in the face of a government cover-up and media disinterest. That's right. So that's what I did. To ignore the Horizon scandal out of fear of taking on Fujitsu, as many MPs and the media did, that's wrong. To listen to the majority of your people when they say they want out of the European Union and to campaign for it on their behalf. To do so even when it puts you in a minority in Parliament and at odds with your own party leadership. That's right. That's what I did. To work like a sneak behind the scenes to frustrate the Brexit vote, as many MPs and civil servants have done. That's wrong. My determination to do right by the people of North West Leicestershire has left me isolated and, like so many of you, politically homeless. Because to win the game of politics, you must do what's right for your party, not your voters. And that's wrong. But if I had my time again, I would not change a thing. Because after 14 years in office, I see economic growth in North West Leicestershire, ranking amongst the highest in the country. I see 1.2 jobs for everyone of working age, which keeps wages going up. We live in the only part of Leicestershire and Rutland where salaries are above the UK average. We build 800 houses a year, which keeps the prices manageable. Good salaries, economic growth, and decent housing at a price within reach, it really isn't hard. Here in North West Leicestershire, you have these things. And North West Leicestershire scores amongst the highest in the Midlands on the happiness index. You do not have these things by accident. You have them because I fought for them. With my background in business, I understand what prosperity is and how to get it. Elect someone else whose first loyalty is to a party based in London, not to you, and you will see these prizes disappear. To commit to a defence union with the European Union, as Labour has done, that's wrong. To promise billions of dollars for a war in Ukraine whilst our public services crumble, that's wrong. To do nothing to bring peace negotiations in that war is wrong. To campaign for a second referendum because you don't like the first result, as Keir Starmer did, that's wrong. To enforce immigration law against people landing illegally on the beaches of Kent and to deport them for their crimes, that would be right. To house these criminals at your expense, while some British veterans and families have no place to call home, is wrong. To teach primary school children that there are more than two sexes, that's wrong. To try and get a bill through Parliament to stop this, as I did, is right. Only a tiny minority would argue otherwise, but politicians from both main parties voted my bill down. And that's wrong. For decades you've been warned that the climate is changing and the world is about to end. This is wrong. The climate has always changed. The world is still turning. The Labour Party and the Conservatives are marching arm in arm towards disaster that is net zero. The data used to justify these insane economic plans doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny. China, India, Russia and others are opening new coal-fired power stations every week. We continue to sacrifice our economic well-being on the altar of this fraud. This is wrong. Re-elect me and I will continue to call this madness out. Nobody else on the ballot paper can. Their parties have surrendered to this cult. When members of the public began to contact me to say that they had been harmed by COVID-19 vaccines, I listened. Just like I listened to Michael Rudkin. Just like I listened to the people of Measham who were worried about HS2. I listened, I researched, I found there were questions to be asked, and I asked them. That's all I did. That is what an MP should do. And that is right. Many other former members of Parliament received similar pleas for help. But they buried their heads in the sand as far as they would go, pulling them out only to attack me when I spoke. That's deeply, deeply wrong. The idea that pharmaceutical companies would cut corners with their safety is hardly revolutionary. All I've ever said is that these questions should be asked and should be answered. Enforce immigration law, protect children from militant transgenderism, call time on net zero, fight the power grab by the WHO, the World Health Organization, and expose vaccine harms. These are my principles. You already know exactly who I am. You also know that on these matters, the political class speaks as one and is forbidden by their parties to ask questions. When the chorus is singing the same tired song, it's the soloist who's remembered. Something once placed on the parliamentary record can never, ever be erased. If you re-elect me, I will be the only member of Parliament whose speech is truly free. My allegiance is to you. My questions and my vote to the House will be for you. I've stood up for you in Parliament for 14 years. Now I'm asking you to stand with me. And let's make the 4th of July our Independence Day. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Strange things started happening in northwest Leicestershire once I was an independent. On a Friday, I was told that the whole of the elections department at northwest Leicestershire had resigned on the same day and been replaced by a whole new team. I rang up the chief exec and said, "What's going on, Alison?" She was new as well. I said, "What's going on, Alison? I've heard the whole of the elections department's resigned at the council." Same day. And she said, "Andrew, it was the right time for them all to move on." I said, "Oh, right time for who, Alison? And what does that mean anyway?" So that was the first worrying sign. Whole new elections department. I'd already agreed with the council a long time ago. The council offices in Colville for North West Leicestershire are not a design icon. Sort of late 1970s, early 80s. It's not brilliant. And we'd agreed that what we wanted to do was move all the public-facing services out of the council offices into any empty shops in the Beaver Centre, the local shopping centre in Colville, and move all the backroom services, HR and accounts and everything, into office blocks. But the council already owned lots of office blocks on the industrial estate nearby. And then the council building itself would be pulled down. It's got a listed building at the front, which is the registry office. That will remain, Stenson House. The offices will be pulled down, and the car parks and the offices will be turned into leisure for the public in Colville, probably a bowling alley and possibly a cinema and all the associated cafes and restaurants and everything to make a bit of nightlife. What I didn't know is that the offices looked like they were abandoned. They got the the metal fences all round and the car park was all. They left the elections department, the new elections department, on their own in that building for at least 6 months before the election. I didn't move them until after the election. I know that because I had a meeting with this new team, and that's where we had the meeting, and there was nobody else in those great big offices except for the elections department. On the night of the election, we are having it at the new Sports and Leisure Centre. We'd always been at the Hermitage Leisure Centre for the previous 4 elections, but because we've got so much economic growth and retained business rates, more than twice as much of any other council in the country. That's the 50% of the new business rates on the new factories that were being built. We'd be able to pay for £24 million for a new sports and leisure centre for Colville. Remember, the most deprived town in Leicestershire. It's got the best sports and leisure centre in the country. Quite right too. And so we had this new election was going to be counted there, right on the bypass, the A511 in Colville, Stevenson's Way. When I got there, about a third of the car park was all coned off, and they got security guards. And I thought, well, what's going on? And I asked one of the security guards, what's going on? And I said, why have you coned off so many car parking spaces? And he said that was for the people bringing the ballot boxes in. We don't want anybody near the ballot boxes. Right? When we got in there, the returning officer, that's her first general election as well. She's new. Her body language was terrible. This is someone who's probably on more money than the Prime Minister, and she's shaking. And she could barely get the words out, and she said words that I've never heard in an election before. Her opening statement was, "You need to bear with us this evening because it could take a long time to bring the ballot boxes in, and we might not get onto the count proper until 2 o'clock in the morning." That's 4 hours after the polls had closed. Never said that before. Normally you get the ballot boxes in about 40 minutes. My constituency, because of all the extra houses we've built, we just had a boundary change. I had actually lost 2 wards, had to lose 2 wards. So my seat had gone down from about 120 square miles to about 105, 100 square miles. So the seat had got smaller, but it was going to take a lot longer to bring the ballot boxes in. And the count was in a much more strategic place on a main road bypass than it had been in the back streets. So there's nowhere in northwest Leicestershire at that time of night you couldn't get from to the count in Colville in 25 minutes, absolute max. But they'd announced this. And then the ballot boxes did come in and they started being opened. There's very few votes for me. I had voted myself at Huddlescote Community Centre at 7:30 that morning. There were six of us in the queue. I voted for me. I'll let you into a secret. In the car park next door, I walked to the car, and before I got out the car park, 2 of the 6 people in the queue behind me came to me and said they voted for me before I got out the car park. Came to me. So I got half the votes in that queue. That was my 3 out of 100. That means the 94 that came afterwards didn't vote for me. None of them. And it's not saying that the ones who didn't come to me and say they voted for me might have voted for me. So it was completely perplexing. And I know what winning feels like. I've done it with an increased majority at every election since 2010. And it's not as if the good people of North West Leicestershire are always loyal to the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or anybody else. Because when I let leave, the Labour Party, Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats, they were all for Remain. But 61% of them still voted with me. And then 63% of them voted for me as the MP at the next election. Every time I go outside my house in North West Leicestershire, whether I go to the coffee shop, to the filling station or the supermarket, people come up to me and say they voted for me. It was probably 3 months after the election I went to the big Tesco's in Ashby-de-la-Zouch. And people who came up to me while I was going around for 40 minutes on a Saturday came to 2% of my vote. Because on paper, my vote dropped from about 33,500 votes to 1,568. Now, I don't think you could, proportionally, you couldn't find 2% of your vote happen to be in the same supermarket as you, in the constituency, in the 40 minutes on a certain Saturday you were there. And then, very worryingly, a fortnight after the election, I got a text message from somebody who I'd been a constituent who I've been speaking to probably every 6 months since the madness started about 5 years ago. He's quite aware of what's going on, and he texted me and said him and his wife had voted for me, they were very supportive of the result. And I rang him, and he said, "I need to tell you something." He said, "I actually work for Ipsos Mori, and I was tasked with doing the exit poll in your constituency." And he said, we were told we were doing it, we got everyone recruited, we knew where we were going to be situated. It just turned out it was going to be at Huddlescote Community Centre where I voted. So it's got 2 polling districts, so there's a lot of voters. He said, "We've got to be there from 7 in the morning till 10 at night with cover for breaks and everything else." And he said, "And we actually ask every 4th person who comes out how they vote. So you've got to catch everybody, but you ask every 4th person, and that's what goes off to London, and that's the exit poll." And he said, "We're all sorted, I recruited everybody, it was all sorted." And he said, "And I knew we were told that as an organisation, Ipsos Mori, we're struggling to find enough people to man all these polling stations on polling day. We said we hadn't got any problems in North West Leicestershire, we were all sorted. We said, and then inexplicably, 2 weeks before the election, his boss rang him and said, stand down, we don't want to poll North West Leicestershire. And I told this to a journalist who, she's fairly awake and knows what's going on, and she has a, I know that because she's been dropped from the Mail, the Telegraph, and everywhere else, and she hasn't really got any work anymore. She said she knew John Curtis, who works at the pollster, who you see on television, who works at Ipsos Mori, does the exit poll. She said, I know him, so what I'll do is and she said she engaged him in some emails, asking him some general questions about how the exit poll was performed for the election that they'd gone. And she said, the emails were coming straight back. And she did about 5 of those, asking him some general questions. The emails were coming straight back. And then she dropped the old hand grenade in and said, John, can you tell me why you pulled out of polling North West Leicestershire 2 weeks before the election? And said that was it. There was never any more emails back after that. By the way, you do know what Ipsos Mori stands for, don't what it means? It means let them die.
Oh.
Catchy name, isn't it? Why would you do that? Ipsos Mori. And every time I go out of the house, people tell me they voted for me. I felt like ringing the police up and say, I think I'm being stalked. Because I only got 3% of the vote. It doesn't matter where I go in North West Leicestershire, they're always there. They're always there. It's different, but they're always there. And I think they're stalking me. I bumped into a retired police officer a few months ago. He used to be in charge of the police in my area. He's well retired for a long time. He'll remain nameless. But I bumped into him at the filling station. He came over to me and he said, how you doing and all that business. And I said, I'm really upset about what they've done in North West Leicestershire and the vote rigging. They've robbed my constituents of their votes, and it's just not right. And he just looked me in the eye and he said, Andrew, what did you think they were going to do to you? And also, the media and the establishment hate me. If I'd really been abandoned by my people, down to 3%, I think it would have been all in the national media that the conspiracy theorist MP, the anti-vaxxer, has been abandoned by his constituents. But you'll notice there was nothing about my election in the mainstream media at all. They didn't want to talk about it. Because if they start talking about it, all they do is rile up my constituents in North West Leicestershire who already know something that's seriously wrong. Something that's seriously wrong. Now, you only have 21 days to raise an official objection to election results, so there's nothing they can do about stopping Amanda Hack being the MP for North West Leicestershire. But what I will say is that there is no statute of limitations on election fraud. That is a very sophisticated, it will have involved a lot of people. I believe that the ballot boxes were tampered with, and votes were taken out and votes were added, which could explain why one of the ballot boxes didn't have the right number of votes in. It had more votes than people who filled in ballot papers at the ballot station. Right? So, those people who have committed that fraud against my constituents and the electoral system, they will be looking over their shoulder for the rest of their lives. Hope they got paid enough, because one day there'll be a whistleblower and it's all going to come out, and they'll still be prosecuted. So I hope it was worth it for them. And I just worry about the integrity of our electoral system. It's only by getting a majority in the House of Commons that you can change our system. But no man is an island, and we might be an island in the UK, but we're not immune to what's happening around the world. It's interesting that when I was thrown out of the Conservative Party in April 23, Not one of my colleagues in the House of Commons, I thought I had friends, not one of them texted me or rang me or came to see me in my office. But I'll tell you now, I did get a personal phone call within an hour from a US presidential candidate at the time called Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who said that it's a disgrace, Andrew, what they're doing to you, and I'll help you and I'll endorse you. Well, we moved time on from there, and he joined with the Trump campaign. I hope and pray that he is adopted as the head of Health and Human Services in America. I believe he's gone very quiet for the last 6 weeks, and people are saying, oh, he's saying things like he wants more vaccines. Well, no, he's playing the game. He's saying he wants safe vaccines, and the science will show that they're not safe. But he has to get in. And I think he's a very good man. I'm particularly pleased that he's announced that he's going to appoint Dr. Jay Bhattacharya as the head of the National Institute for Health in America. That's effectively the replacement for Anthony Fauci. Jay is an absolutely wonderful man. A really, really good man. I just worry that he might need a very, very powerful deputy out there, because he's such a nice man. He will not be used to working with people's with benevolent intent that he'll have to deal with them. It's a viper's nest in politics. And we saw the way that RFK was being cross-examined in the Senate hearing by senators who've taken millions and millions and millions of pounds from Big Pharma. I mean, I've come to realise that, we look in the UK, that our institutional barrels, the police, the judiciary, politics, local government, not all the apples are rotten in the barrels, but all the apples at the top of the barrels are rotten. And any apple that wishes to rise to the top has to be rotted. That is the way the system works. So we are going to have a system where we take the top off all our institutional barrels, because they have corrupted the whole system, and they've not worked for all the people. And what we also need, we need a system. When this is over, and I do think it will be over, and I do think we're going to win, and I think, I'm hoping, and praying, and I have prayed the last 5 years more than I've ever prayed in my life, as probably many people have. And a lot of what I prayed for was probably that I was not right about what I was thinking, but unfortunately I am right about what I was thinking, even though I wish it wasn't. But we're not as easy to kill as they think we are. We're damn difficult to kill. We are like cockroaches. They keep stamping on us, but we're still moving. And I think what Trump has done already in America, revolutionary things like saying there are only men and women and anything else. Certainly anyone who says in school that suggests that a child might be in the wrong body, we'll cut the funding to your school and you're not going to be a teacher anymore. That was the bill I tried to bring in effectively 18 months ago, the Child Protection and Parental Rights Bill that the Parliament voted down. So that he's bringing that in. Just made it so that there's no more licenses for wind farms and solar farms in America. You can't get a license. That's it done. They're going to get use the fossil fuels they've got. They're going to be energy independent again. What you've got to remember about what's being done to us with net zero in this country is particularly harsh on us. We've now got the most expensive electricity in the world. Developed world. Any country in the developed world. Our electricity is 5 times more expensive than China and 4.5 times more expensive than India. If you're running a manufacturing business in the UK, you can't compete. The world elites put $500 billion of investment into China before COVID, and they put another $500 billion of investment into China during the lockdowns. So that's $1 trillion. They want to get a return on that money. So we're exporting all our jobs, and prosperity to China because and India because they've got cheap electricity and we can't compete. All we're doing is transporting our carbon out there. And the laughing thing about they're making all the solar panels, the wind turbines, and the batteries for these ludicrous electric cars using power stations that are fired on coal. China is increasing its emissions and has increased its emissions and will increase its emissions every year for the last decade, this decade and the next decade. Their increase is more than our total emissions in the UK. I mean, if we took ours down to zero, it wouldn't make any difference. If carbon dioxide were a thing. And I've looked into all of this. And carbon dioxide is a thing. It is a greenhouse gas. But I remember asking a Labour frontbencher a long time ago, I mean the last debate on this I spoke in last year, I was the only one that spoke against net zero in the whole House. And I asked one of these Labour frontbenchers, who was personally a friend of mine, but not politically, and I said to him, this carbon dioxide thing, it sounds serious. How much do you think, what percentage of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide? And he said it's going to be a lot. He said it's not, it's getting bigger. I said, well, go on, hit me with it. He said it's 8%, you know. I mean, is it really? Is it really? It's 0.042 of 1%. 420, maybe 430 parts per million. And it is a greenhouse gas. It's a minute part of the atmosphere. And its relationship between carbon dioxide and temperature is not linear. i.e., carbon dioxide goes up, its effect on temperature, it doesn't go up like that. It's logarithmic, so every time to get the same increase you have to double. Now the thing about carbon dioxide is we're probably relatively at the lowest amount of carbon dioxide we've ever had in our atmosphere since when we started measuring temperature, about 280 parts per million. It was probably the lowest it's ever been in the history of the world. And it's gone up a bit, and we're responsible for some of that. But if the carbon dioxide level in our atmosphere drops below 0.02%, 200 parts per million, the plants will start to die. And 3 months later, we're not here either. And 98% of the warming effect of carbon dioxide is below 200 parts per million. And we've already had all of that because the relationship between temperature change and carbon dioxide concentration is linear. Is logarithmic, not linear. So it's a bit, the analogy, which I think it probably explains it the best, is you've got a load of carbon dioxide, you paint that wall red, you double the amount of carbon dioxide, you paint the wall red again, another coat of red. It doesn't get much redder, does it? And then you double it again, paint the wall red again. Paint it red 3-4 times, it's not getting any redder. That's the relationship between carbon dioxide and temperature. It doesn't make any difference. We're down to about 0.1% of any more warming from carbon dioxide at the levels we're at. So it's a complete hoax. It's just actually a way of controlling you, taxing you, and removing your freedoms. And we're falling for it. And all it's doing is we're de-industrialising. When us and the Americans blew up the Nord Stream, I mean, anybody think that Russia blew up their own pipeline? I mean, they could have just switched the gas off, couldn't they? Not blow their pipeline up. Right? But they blame the Russians for that. That put €1 trillion cost onto German business, removing that gas. Now that Germany's losing their manufacturing base as well to China, and their chemicals industry, everything that's energy intensive is being moved away. And that's destroying another European country's economy. All apparently with the agreement of our governments. It's it's self-harming, and it's being carried out on a... Well, Trump's turning that round. In America, they're going to push all this through. It's going to... You know this Gulf of America business? Yeah, you've got to look what they're doing. He's quite clever. I mean, what he's done there is Biden has said no drilling for oil in the Gulf of Mexico. We're not doing it in the Gulf of Mexico, we're doing it in the Gulf of America. Yeah? All right. So, and I think the changes that Trump is bringing in, social changes, economic changes, I think that's going to excuse me, deliver immediate results that are tangible for the American economy and their society, and accountability of politicians, stopping the corruption. I mean, merely stopping US aid funding the BBC has got to be a good thing, hasn't it? And that is going to have a ripple effect, a tsunami of truth and justice. I mean, you know, if we're nowadays, the world's quite a small place, you know, and it's a small pond, and Trump's chucking pretty big bricks in there, and the ripples are going to come out, and I think it's going to create a demand and an expectation in countries around the world who want the same changes. And, you know, we're looking into a mirror of ourselves. We've all had the same nightmare of tyranny placed upon us by our own governments. All the weird things that have gone on, the inexplicable decisions about ripping up 20 and 30-year developed pandemic responses and planning and ripping all that up and adopting WHO lockdowns and mandates and masking protocols. I mean, the world was in lockstep. The world appears to have been in lockstep over net zero. The world appears to be in lockstep over this social transitioning and the teaching that to our children. I spoke to Australian senators, and they've got transsexuals going into their junior schools just like they're going into our junior schools at the same time, even though they're on the other side of the world. And then you look back and you see actually what's driving it all is the United Nations guidance on sexuality education in schools, you know, where they say that a 4-year-old should know about masturbation, you know, and a 6-year-old should be able to express their needs and desires with regard to sexuality. I don't think so. This is a groomer's charter. And that's what's been implemented. Well, I mean, Trump's making the right noises. He's pulled out of the WHO. He's defunding the WHO. Other countries will follow. And the globalist plans are going to start to fall apart. And I hope with RFK in position, we're going to get back to real science. We're going to, as I said in the House of Commons, take the politics out of our science and get some real science back into our politics. And we need to move away from what we've had, which is, I mean, I came into politics to make life better for my constituents in North West Leicestershire, and that's what I believe we did, and I wanted to make it better for the country. But I never forgot that I worked for you. I worked for my people. I was never their master. But that's not what I feel you think the government is now. And there's a saying, it may have been Tony Benn that said it, and although I didn't agree with his politics, the many things he said I did agree with. He was a great Democrat, and he believed in democracy and accountability. And he said that when the people are scared of the politicians, that is tyranny. But when the politicians are scared of the people, that's democracy. And we need to make them scared, because they've certainly been doing things that are not in your interest. And I would point out that when Tony Blair got in 97 with his landslide. I don't know if any of you remember what the first piece of legislation he put through, which was inexplicable. It wasn't in his manifesto, and no one could understand then why you were doing it. But we can understand now. First thing he did, to go into government, was to take the death penalty out of the Treason Act. And I put it to you that there's good evidence that him and every Prime Minister since have committed treason against the people. Because if you were to conspire with a foreign entity, World Economic Forum, somebody else, WHO, conspire against your interests of the people we represented in the House of Commons, I don't know what other definition of treason there is. And that's what has been done on a gross scale. And I think we're going to have, and there are many things I could have talked about. I talked about net zero, I talked about the transgender indoctrination of our children, I talked about the vaccine harms. There are other things. There are other things I could have talked about. I concentrate on the vaccine harms because, sadly, no government can hold the bodies indefinitely. They can fiddle the figures and do everything, but at the end of the day, too many of us, we know people who've been taken from us, friends and relatives, because of the vaccines or because of the huge number of increase in cancers we've seen just lately. A lot of it bowel cancer. And that is going to have to come out somewhere in the world. It doesn't matter whether we break it in America. We've all had the same vaccines across most of the developed world. We have been, or whether it comes out of Japan or Australia or wherever. But I honestly believe we can't blame the Americans for all of this. Although the vaccines, I travelled to America 2 years ago, Christmas gone. I met with Senator Ron Johnson on Capitol Hill and some scientists. We knew then that the vaccine and the virus were developed at Chapel Hill in America and sent to Wuhan. We didn't actually know that it was a bioweapon. But we agreed that we just couldn't tell the public for another 6 months because we just weren't ready for it. They would just run away from us and we'd be completely... and that's just where we were at the time, 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. I'm not sure who's most responsible, whether it's those cowardly politicians who knew and wouldn't say, or it's the mainstream media, and how they've controlled the media is, the mainstream media, no one's listening anymore, no one's reading their newspapers anymore. They got rid of their investigative journalists, who were quite expensive, a long time ago. And none of them dare speak against the narrative, because they're looking for an excuse to get rid of them anyway. So all your experienced journalists are getting cold, and they're replacing them with people coming out of university who haven't got any experience and they're just grateful for a job on less money. I think there's about, of people who do journalism as a degree, there's about 10% ever get a job in journalism. So they've created massive competition and massive fear, and they're all worried about their jobs. And at the end of the day, I think probably the mainstream media is becoming increasingly irrelevant to the arguments. You know, I saw a piece the other day about, GB News is challenging the BBC for the #1 watched news station. Yeah, they probably are. But you're arguing about 73,000 people watching. And Sky are down at 62,000 viewers. And they're closing down. I mean, you know, I think I did a piece on Alex Jones the other week, and it had over 50 million views. You know, what will the BBC say? People are not looking at that any longer for their news. I think they're making programs for themselves nowadays. So, I think that what's happening in America. And don't think for 1 minute that Trump's inauguration was moved inside and an audience of 200 because it's cold. I've been to DC quite a number of times. It's always cold in January. Very cold in January. That was security risk because they're still trying to kill him. And they will try and kill him. And we've got to pray that he gets a good team around him, because good people at the top recruit good people. As we've seen, bad people recruit bad people. But I think that tsunami of truth and justice is going to ripple out across the Atlantic and around the world, and I think it's going to sweep away the self-serving politicians that we've got in this country and many others, and create a genuine demand for real change. And what is that change got to be? Well, when this is over, as I said in the video 2 years ago, it will be over, I promise you. When we've sorted this out, we're going to have a better system than we've got now. Because what I'm not going to stand, and what I hope you're not going to stand, is that this is never going to be done to the people again. You know, the current system we've got has got us into this situation. Our party politics is corrupted, our politicians are corrupted, our institutions are corrupted, and when we sort it out, we've got to have a system that doesn't allow it to creep back in again. Otherwise, all we're doing is pushing that onto future generations. And believe me, it will come again unless we... My immediate solution, the best solution I can think of at the moment is, if it was up to me today, I would get rid of half of the House of Commons straight away. So cut the number of MPs down to 325. Just give two constituencies one MP. Controversially, I would pay MPs a lot more money, and you could do if you cut the number by half. No external interest whatsoever while you're an MP. And get rid of all the House of Lords. They're useless. They've done nothing to protect the public interest. And it's a place where you reward people who've played the party system and always voted against your interests. They end up in the House of Lords, where they can carry on doing it, and you can't vote, you can vote them out. So get rid of all of them and move to the Swiss direct democracy model, where you are democracy comes from demos, which is the people, and kratos, which is the power, from the Greek. And how powerful do you feel now? You're supposed to live in a democracy where you've got the power. Do you feel like you've got the power? You haven't got the power. Currently, a man who got the votes of 20% of the adults in this country who could have voted, currently he's got the power. So we get rid of half of the MPs. Also, what corrupts is the whip's offices, and the fact that being a minister you get more perks, like more money. Now, I think we should get away from that by saying, well, all the ministerial pay just gets shared out amongst the MPs and everyone gets paid the same. If I said to you, you're going to be the Prime Minister, you've been elected as an MP and now you can be the Prime Minister. If you said to me, yeah, but I want another 100 grand or so, I'm not doing it. Well, I don't think you're the right person to be doing it. Yeah? If being a chair of a select committee on health or justice or home office or whatever, if doing that job for your country, you think, I need another 20 grand, I don't think you're the right person to do it. And also that takes away that they can reward anybody for playing the game of politics by saying, well, we'll make you a minister. And also means that every MP, when they vote, their vote counts the same, and they're all paid the same, whether you're a backbencher or whether you're the Prime Minister. What difference does it make? Takes away the influence and makes sure they're all working for you. And the Swiss model, Switzerland is about twice as prosperous per income per household as we've got, and interestingly they haven't had a war for 150 years. And we don't get me started on Ukraine, and I mean they're just not telling you the truth about any of that, I can assure you. That is going to come out, I think, as well, or some of it, and it will shock you at the way that propaganda has been used to paint a certain situation. The rough facts are that in 1991, when we negotiated with Russia at the end of the Cold War, when the Iron Curtain was down, the deal that NATO did or Europe did with Russia was, if you give us back Soviet Union, you give us back West Germany and let Germany reform itself, we will not, they said, we promised we would not move Europe or NATO east of Germany. And we have broken that Minsk agreement so many times with the Baltic states, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, et al. And what Putin has said for the last 10 years is, you're not having Ukraine. And I'm not having Ukraine in the EU, because the next step is it'll be in NATO. And then you will have nuclear missiles on the border in Ukraine, which can be in Moscow in 20 minutes. You might remember, we won't remember, but in the late 1950s, there was a bit of a crisis in Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Americans, quite rightly, got exercised that the then Soviet Union wanted to put nuclear missiles in Cuba, pointed at America, which were 90 miles off the Florida coast. And that nearly took us to World War III. Well, why would you think that Putin would be any different? And he's told us the same consistent story for 10 years. And a lot of bad things were going on in the Donbass. And there's a lot of, I think Ukraine is probably the most corrupt country in the world. There was a lot of biolabs over there, as we know from the Biden family investments, the Biden crime family investments. And you know, who makes money out of war? So you know, BlackRock and most of the companies selling the weapons, providing the hardware. They've bought 30% of all the farmland in Ukraine since the war started, through companies that they own. And they've got the contract to rebuild Ukraine after the war. It sounds like, you know, the only winners out of this war is certainly not the Ukrainian people. They started out with 44 million in Ukraine. There's less than 18 million people in Ukraine now. They're either dead or they've emigrated. And what have they got to come back to when the war's over? They're not going to come back. It's the end of the Ukrainian people. They're not winning. Russia have probably lost 1 million young people. I think the casualties on the Ukrainian side are probably 700,000. And then they've been losing slowly, and now they're losing more quickly for the last 12 months. I urged our government to negotiate with the Russians when it was at a stalemate. We will not get the same deal now out of Putin. And of course, I'll share something with you. Putin is a clever man, and I think whether he's a good man or a bad man, I'm not sure he's as bad as the ones we've got. Because he showed us his Oreshnik missile. He fired it at Dnipro, it's a weapons factory. It moves at 11 times the speed of sound. You can't stop it. 11 times the speed of sound. Why did he do that? Well, I suggest to you, I had a briefing from security services a long time ago that part of the plan to get the war going in Europe would be a false flag nuclear detonation in Western Europe, blamed on Russia. By showing us the Oreshnik missile, what did Putin say? I don't need to use nuclear weapons. I would use this, because, and I'll tell you where I'm going to hit, because you can't stop it anyway. Your civilians can get out of the way, and I'll just fire it at you. That was to stop someone using a nuclear detonation as a false flag against Russia. It is really easy. See, in the UK, what's our national sport? It's football. What's the national sport in Russia? It's chess. Chess. That's what they play. And I think Putin's quite a chess player. But if Putin's not completely against us, and if Trump is a man of his word and not compromised, and we've got RFK, we're in with more than a chance. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is ours. But I will give you one last thing to remember, is you've got to count your blessings in this country. Because having been served in the House of Commons for 14 years, you are lucky. I can assure you, because in my experience, you've got the best politicians that money can buy. Questions? Sorry? I'm going to put those four past. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have some questions? You put your hand up, we have a roving mic.
That's you, Bob.
Hi. Do you have any opinion on the Reform Party, and do you think that Nigel Farage is working with Donald Trump?
Yes, I do have views on the Reform Party. I think Reform at the top are managed opposition. When I exhausted the whole of the House of Commons 2 years ago, I went to Nigel and said, Nigel, help me as a political figure. You help me stop them vaccinating the babies. You're on the right side of history and you'll be a hero. You'll be Prime Minister. And Nigel Farage said to me over 2 years ago, Andrew, I'm not speaking about the vaccines, and if you know what's good for you, you won't speak about the vaccines. So he knew. He also won't speak about Starmer's plan for a defence pact with the EU. That's not a defence pact, that's the European Defence and Securities Union that they're rolling out over the EU. That will give the EU control of our Army, Navy, Air Force, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, our nuclear deterrent, which is going to go to northern France on the Atlantic coast, out of Scotland, and our local police force, right? Now, Nigel knows all this, but Nigel doesn't want to talk about it. He says, Brexit's done, and we've got to forget about it. Well, it's never done, and, I see what you're saying. Nigel's telling me the narrative is settled. The science is settled on this. Another red flag. So, yeah, I have grave concerns. And merely the fact that the mainstream media are now touting Nigel as the next Prime Minister, the same mainstream media who won't talk about the post office 10 years ago, won't talk about vaccine harms, excess deaths, the WHO, net zero, that in itself tells me that he's already in the club. And it's a big club, but unfortunately we're not in it, right? We're not in it. They're in it. Okay, next question please.
Thank you. Chemtrails, what can we do about that? I've written to the aviation in London. There's no phone number and there's no email and there's no reply.
Okay, chemtrails. If you'd come to me about chemtrails 2 years ago, I'd have said we need locking up. And really we need to lock them up. It is a thing. East Midlands Airport in North West Leicestershire. I got to people who were on the board of companies who were doing it, and they got off because they didn't like the ethics of what's going on. They're flying out on military IDs, you can't track them out the airport. There's 3 short Boeings fully fitted up with spray equipment. The cover is that they're on retention by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency to go and spray if we ever have a oil slick with a detergent to break the oil slick up, but they're out off flying. I believe that 2/3 of the chemicals are coming in from America and 1/3 are coming in from India, and there's another company doing it as well, but it's also a lot of military traffic doing it around the world, so it looks like a NATO operation. It's interesting. I think the Americans will stop it first. There's already about 5 states that are putting legislation through to ban it. Interesting how you could ban something that's not happening. RFK is on the job as well. He said they'll stop it. The last question, and again, remember about how the post office answered the question about the Horizon system and altering the accounts. Remember? They don't like lying to you, but what the answer is so twisted, it's actually deceit. The last written question I got back before Rishi Sunak handed the baton over at the election to Mr. Starmer, I put a written question in which you can probably go and look at on the record. My written question was, is the government carrying out any geoengineering, cloud seeding or weather manipulation that could affect UK airspace? And the follow-up question was, or is it aware of anybody else that's doing this? And the government crossed out the second bit of the question and put no. And they didn't want to. So I would suggest that that tells you exactly what you need to know. And they can say what they want about the vaccines, and they can always try and say, well, you know, we were in a pandemic, or we thought we were in a pandemic, probably weren't in a pandemic. We thought we were in a pandemic when we made a decision, and they lied to us. How are they going to get by the fact that they've been spraying us? Yeah? How do you get around that? I mean, that's going to wake a few people up, isn't it? And what we had the last 12 months, we just had, you know, I don't know what it was like down here. We don't see the sun much anymore in the Midlands. The crops don't grow, and we just had the worst harvest, second worst harvest in history. Yeah? Food prices will be up again. Okay, so yes, but again, I think we're going to be relying on the Americans to drive that one through. Next question, please.
Thanks, Andrew. An update on where you're at with Matt Hancock and the case against Matt Hancock.
Okay.
Great.
Well, this has been going on for over 2 years. Hancock's, when we got to last November, I think it was the 26th of November, we had something called a CMC, case management hearing in the diary for months. That was to move the case forward. I thought we were going to use that day, we were going to get to how many days for the final hearing, what the main issues are for the judge to decide, dates for the final bits of evidence. On I think it was the 6th of November, Hancock's lawyers emailed me, because I'm a litigant in person, I only have a barrister, I can't afford a legal team, I have to do most of the legwork myself, emailed me and said, we're putting in for another strikeout. He's already had one of those, tried to strike out my claim against him. And this time he said, we're going to claim that Hancock's tweet calling you anti-Semitic, anti-scientific, anti-vax, racist, didn't do you any harm. Okay, good luck with that. As long as we've got a straight judge. Oh no, that's the problem. So, this is sort of 22 days before, so Hancock can keep, because he's got a lot more money than me, keep putting in these delaying tactics, because he never wants to go to trial. Also, so immediately I saw this email from Hancock's lawyers. I wrote to the Royal Courts of Justice, you know, centre of top people on the stand, and I said, look, what's this going to be? And the court emailed back, the clerks emailed back from the court the next morning on the Friday, and they said, we're that busy, we couldn't look at anything for a month. So I thought, well, that's good, because he can't get that in, possibly, before the 26th. That means at least we're going to move the case forward, because it's not just about the £50,000 for another hearing. One day is £50,000 in court. And if you lose, it's 100 grand, because you've got to pay his side. But it would bankrupt me anyway if we went down now, because that's how far we're in. That is his plan. They tried to bankrupt me about 4 months ago. That failed. They'll try again. This is very dubious. But so the court, I thought that was quite good. So I thought, well, you know, he can't get his application for a strikeout in quickly. So we're going to get the CMC. At least we're going to get a date for the final hearing. By the following Wednesday, the court writes back and says, here is his dates we've accepted his application. So 3 days after they told me they couldn't look at anything for a month, they come back and say, oh yeah, we've got all these dates for him and we're accepting his application for another strikeout. Well, first of all, strikeout is something you're supposed to do at the beginning of a case, and he'd already done one of those a year ago, not near the end when you're moving to the final hearing, because it's supposed to be a way of like preventing costs. Well, and how could he claim possibly at a time when we've got people in this country being sent to prison for 2.5 years for something they wrote on Twitter or Facebook, and yet Hancock can call a sitting MP anti-Semitic, anti-science, anti-vax? Well, let's just take those arguments one at a time. Anti-Semitic, right? The greatest crime against humanity since the Holocaust, vaccine rollout. Since is a big word. The definition of anti-Semitism, government-defined definition of anti-Semitism, is to deny or minimise the Holocaust. That's the definition of anti-Semitism. So, the vaccine rollout is the biggest crime against humanity since the Holocaust. Is that denying the Holocaust? No, it's saying the Holocaust is the worst thing that's happened in humanity. And all I'm saying is that the vaccine rollout is the second worst thing. So I'm saying that's a bad thing, but it's not as bad as the Holocaust, or the Holocaust is the worst thing. Anyway, there's no way that fits that definition. Anti-scientific. Well, I mean, I'm the one with the science degree. He's got a degree in PPE from Oxford, like they all have. He ain't learning all the science. And he says, I'm anti-vax. Well, they suckered me. I took to AstraZeneca, and it hurt me. So, I mean, yeah, I'm anti-vax now, but I wasn't until I took the vaccines. Yes. And so, I mean, it's just ludicrous. But the fact that the court found in these dates, and then, not only that, he said in the letter, then he said, and I want Judge Nicklin to be running the hearing. Well, I didn't know you could choose your own judges. He said that's what he wanted, and he's had nothing to do with the case. I would point out to you, good people of Lyndhurst and around in the environs, that Judge Nicklin is the judge that put Tommy Robinson in prison. And I would point out to you, another thing you probably don't realise, is that Hancock's lawyer, barrister, is called Aidan Eardley, KC, who's now also been appointed during this case to also be a judge on the King's Bench with the judges who were judging us. And he's the barrister that the Attorney General appointed that put Tommy Robinson away. So they want to bring that little team back together again for this case. Well, I've already pointed out to the Royal Courts of Justice that I've spoken on television criticising the judge's decision to put Tommy Robinson in prison for 18 months for a civil offence. So, I mean, you can't have the judge that did it or was associated with the case, because that would be, might have the appearance of bias, mightn't it? So we can't have that. But anyway, he's got this, and we've got a date now, the 12th of March, but I've used the doubling cube on him. So what we've said is that the case for harm is so great, that we not only want to strike out to neutralise his strikeout, I want summary judgment against him, and on the grounds that Hancock's desperate. Hancock is in defamation, you have to have a defence. And one of the defences, easiest defence is, it's true. Right, I can't defame you if what I'm saying is true. Hancock has never gone that calling me anti-Semitic was true. He can't say it's true because I've just explained to you it's not. My statement was not anti-Semitic in any way. So he can't use truth. He's admitted during the proceedings, or his lawyers have, that he knows it's defamatory. Calling me anti-Semitic is defamatory. And he knows it's not true, because he's not going with the defence of truth. He can't go with the defence of truth now, because he's never gone with it. Well, where else can he go other than I've done you no harm? But my point would be that when you look at it, if he knew he's never claimed it was true, so he always knew that what he was saying wasn't true, even when he said it 2 years ago and tweeted it. Said it in the Chamber House Grounds and tweeted it. He knew it wasn't true. He knows it's defamatory. The only reason the only thing he had to gain from that is smearing me and damaging me. And he's admitted in his evidence that he had a vested interest in defending the government's position on vaccines. He's admitted that in his evidence. So, which also means, incidentally, that when Sunak answered him in the Chamber of House of Commons, because he's a clever man as well, he knew what he was saying wasn't true either. And you'll notice that when they have a little vignette of deceit against me in the chamber, they never named me. I put it to you that it would be reasonable to say that I believe they took legal advice that would make it harder for me to seek justice and reparations against them. Which is why they didn't. Now, otherwise, why would both of them not have? And you'll also notice that they were both reading from notes. Hancock was reading his question, and the Prime Minister was reading from notes. Hancock didn't have a PMQ on the order paper. It was an ad hoc question, but it was clearly they colluded outside of the chamber to concoct that. They didn't name me, and because they didn't name me, they never had to inform me that they were going to name me in the chamber, so I wasn't there. Yeah? And that was all created that morning, the 11th of January. I think I tweeted it about 9:03, and that was all that conspiracy happened in those 3 hours, and I'm going to nail them for it. Right, I think we've got two or three more questions. I've got to go at 15:15. I've got an interview in my hotel room remotely with Jim Ferguson and Liz Gunn at 15:30. I've got to go over there.
Right.
Right.
Right across the road. Thank you. Andrew, just how can we, what do you feel is the progress of how we're winning, as it were, in this country as groups like ours and working with you, good people like you? How can we spread
Working with good people and me. Yes, I know what you mean. How can you help? Well, we can all pray. We can all spread the word. Got to wake people up gently. Those who aren't awake now, I mean, sadly, some people are not going to believe it until they see it on the BBC. And they're not going to see it on the BBC, are they? You know? And there are a lot of things that have gone on and are going on, and a lot of them are wrong. And if someone's only at 3 out of 10, you can't take them to 10 out of 10, else they're just going to, yeah. I will tell you a funny story. I haven't really got time, but I'm going to anyway. Before I was expelled, when I was expelled from the Conservative Party, they expelled me out of my club in London as well. I'd been a member of the Carlton Club in London on St James for 17 years. And they threw me out when I got thrown out of the Conservative Party. It was a Conservative club. But before I was thrown out, the year or so before, I'd been holding court there with the members who aren't members of Parliament, and I was telling them, you know, this week we found this out about the vaccines, and you know, the DNA contamination, and we found this about the strokes and the heart attacks, and blah, blah, blah. And you know, a little group would listen. And there was always this smart-ass lawyer at the back called Philip, and he was in something like oil and gas contracts, so his normal day would be representing Shell versus the Saudi government in some corporate court in London. And at the end of these little things, and he was always there hanging around the Carlton Club, and he was saying, I hear what you're saying, Andrew, but I think they're safe and effective. And I'd say, well, you know, you're a top lawyer, Philip. Why do you think they're safe and effective? Because the government tell me they are. And this went on for a long time. And then, I think it was just before Christmas 22, I went into the Carlton Club. Nice, beautiful, beautiful building. In through the hallway. the Macmillan bar up on the right, open the big door, and it's sort of here to those double doors to the bar, and the bar's there, and the only person I could see was the barman and someone sitting at a bar stool at the bar. And as I opened the door to go into this big bar, this guy turned, and it was Philip, the lawyer, and half his face was. And I didn't say anything, I looked at him, and he said, "It's not the vaccine, Andrew." I said, it probably isn't, Philip. I said, but all I'll tell you is, in the last 30 years, I've only known one person who had Bell's palsy, but this year I've known 7 or 8, and I think you're the 8th. But I know it's not the vaccine. I mean, you can't save him, you know. I mean, this guy is completely deluded. But those, I think we need to wake people up gently. You can drop little bits in, you know. And the vaccines, I'm sorry, they can't hide the bodies. That's some of the easier things before we take them on to the chemtrailing. But I mean, even, look, the skies aren't natural, are they? No. You know, they're not natural. Gently, but with purpose.
Excellent. Andrew, please tell us about your paperclip on your repair. Yes.
Oh, the paperclip. Oh yeah, people always ask me about the paperclip. It's not Operation Paperclip, by the way. I spoke in Stavanger in Norway over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. The Norwegians invented the paperclip, they call it a binder, to bind people together, before the Second World War, and they wore them as a sign of resistance to the German occupation during the occupation years. And it was punishable by immediate death by firing squad. And they still wore them. And the Norwegians said they'd got no one in Parliament who would speak up on the vaccine harms and the excess deaths and the net zero nonsense. And so they said, will you wear the paperclip and speak for us too? And I said, I would. And it's now, if you Google it, I think there's a day in May, it's called International Paperclip Day, and it's now a sign, it's an international sign, symbol of resistance to oppression, and I think we're currently being oppressed. Right, one more question. Again, there's more of you putting your hands up now. There's more than we started with.
Hello, Andrew. You mentioned about Nigel Farage and reform just a little while ago. If, say, there was a general election in the near future, who would we vote for? Because I was thinking of reforms the place to vote.
There isn't anyone to vote for. I mean, you know, to be honest, they rig it anyway, but I think, who was it said? If voting made any difference, they wouldn't let you do it, would they? Well, I mean, they're all over. We need, I'm afraid, a new party that's not based on anybody's big money. I mean, reform isn't even a party. It's 60% owned by Nigel Farage. It's a limited company, and I think there'll be some revelations to come out, which is not going to be good.
Thank you.
So none of the above at the moment.
Can I just share something?
The microphone. You can share the microphone.
Thank you. Some of you might know Ray Savage, and he said this morning that tomorrow Elon Musk he's paid £40 million for 3 advertisements through the Super Bowl, and they think it'll probably be a lot of disclosure. So that's not really a question.
Well, let's hope so. I'm all for disclosure. In transparency, sunlight is the best disinfectant of all, and very good for vitamin D as well. Come on, quickly, let's get these last few questions done. I'm going to have to go and do this interview.
Myself, probably everybody.
Microphone.
Myself and everybody sat here are probably well aware of what you've said this evening. The last 4.5 years have been a very steep learning curve for me, probably steeper than Everest. I'm probably not going to sleep tonight. what advice can you offer us as individuals and collectively? Because you just said we can't vote for anybody. So what is it that we can physically do? What can you advise us, please?
I think there will be an organisation who will come forward. I don't think we're going to have a general election. However bad Starmer is, got a massive majority, he could suspend 100 MPs and still win any votes. We're not in a democracy anyway, we're a dictatorship. That's going to be for the next 4 years. We're going to have to ride that out, but something will arise, and I think in the meantime you've got to look after yourself as best you can, keep yourself as healthy as possible, eat the best food you can, look after your friends, neighbours, relatives, and spread that word. And I think there will be a point where it will be, and it might be this year, I think it could well be this year, where we will have to stand up and say enough's enough, you're not pushing us any further. And when we get to that tipping point, you know, when you have, you know, if the government is tyrannical, then it's your duty to end it. And I think we could get to that point, and I think what we'll see going on in America and them putting things right that we're pressing on with will exacerbate the expectation and the knowledge that we're going completely in the wrong direction and unnecessarily. So they're harming you. I mean, when your own government is doing policies that are deliberately harming you, I mean, are you obliged to have to go along with it? You know, and he only ever got the acquiescence or the agreement of 20% of the adult population. In the real world, the king would step in and dissolve Parliament. But that is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. Next question, please. That's what should happen. That's what should happen.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. But what I want to know is why are the governments of any colour determined to destroy Britain?
Because they're all bought and paid for. They're all bought and paid for. And they're all compromised. So, I mean, once you compromise, if I'd taken that bribe, then I said, well, actually, I want out now. I don't want to play this game. You know, well, you can't because you've taken the bribe. You know, the very wealthiest people in the world, World Economic Forum, they're a front for them. I don't know the names of the people. Probably the 13 banking families, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, those sort of people. The people who always run the world.
It's a very sensitive question. I heard Farage think that Trump made a very big mistake about making abortion an issue, but in fact it was an issue. And when we look at Britain and you talk about the Holocaust, we've destroyed 50% of our indigenous population since 1967. That's 10 million potential citizens.
Yep.
That's over 250,000 a year.
Yep.
We're not producing.
And then they say that, well, we have to have immigrants because we're not having any children anymore.
So isn't it a mathematical certainty that we will become an Islamic nation? There's nothing we can do about it.
If we keep the same trajectory, we don't do anything about it, that is a certainty. And Nigel Farage has said it's a certainty, and he said, I don't want to walk the boat because basically they'll be in charge by 2050, whatever we do. And if you accept that. But you see, all this woke agenda, the immigration agenda, we've been taught to accept it because, well, it's progress and you can't stop it, you know, once the genie's out the bottle. Well, what you're going to see in America is that all the woke stuff just had its legs cut off, and the immigration, when they start deporting the illegal migrants, and there is something, you know, there's a clue in the title, isn't there? You know, illegal migrants, you know, it's illegal. I mean, there's a case that the Chief Constable of Kent should be arrested and charged with, you know, malfeasance in public office because these criminals have landed on the beach and he didn't do anything about it, put them up in a 4-star hotel. I spoke to a retired police officer who's a probation officer, and he said You know, some of these people driving the boats are coming over 43 times. Some of them were bringing the boats over, dropping the people off in Kent, and then taking the empty boats back over to Calais. They're coming further away. They can't set out from Calais, but they can come in from the 2K and then come back, because they never stopped them bringing the empty boat back over. One guy had done it 43 times and never been stopped. And my old policeman friend said, you try and smuggle some cigarettes or alcohol in a boat, see how many trips you do before the police spot you. So you won't be 3, you'll be less than 3. So I mean, you know, it's a racket, an absolute racket we're in here. Oh, I'll tell you another little gem. You know why they send the RNLI out to go and meet the boats halfway across the channel? Because then they're treated as people who were shipwrecked. And they have special rights, they're not illegal migrants. That's why they've always sent the lifeboat out to go and get them, because they've got special rights. They don't tell you that one, do they? That's why they're using the lifeboats to go and get them. It's all planned. One more. Hang on. These hands are breathing.
Thanks so much for hanging on, Andrew. Given the scale of corruption that you described and the endemic nature that it's sort of baked into the whole establishment, where's the enforcement, do you believe, in this country? Because we can see Trump and his team starting to take very big decisions and the impact of those. But where does the rubber hit the road over here?
Well, what we must make sure, and I'll tell you now, there's going to be a big push from Starmer's government to get rid of it or suspend it, and you'll never get it back. We must maintain trial by jury. It's the only chance you've got. They're going to come at it and say, we've got massive delays in the courts because of COVID, can't get them down. What we need to do is suspend jury trials, and with these expert judges, they'll sort everything out. We'll never get jury trial back. So our only chance of justice is being judged under common law by your peers. I don't think the military in this country would turn on us, but I don't see that they have the generals as determined to protect the people. I mean, our military have been, the people at the top basically came in under Blair. Now, Tony Blair has many things to answer for. Basically, if you look at every bit of legislation he put through since '97, none of that's been repealed, and that everything he did undermined and facilitated our institutional failure that we've got now under corruption. From the you know why he made I thought, why is he making policemen and nurses have to have a degree? That is to get them in the debt trap so they daren't lose their jobs when it came to making them do things that they didn't want to do. Yeah, get them in the debt trap. Yeah. Compliance. Okay. Next question.
Do you need to go?
It's a very quick one. Last one. Thank you. I'm curious, Andrew, because earlier you said you'd had a couple of COVID jabs.
Yeah.
And got a science degree. So how come you went for the jabs?
You know the propaganda that was pushed out to the people. Can you imagine what was used on members of Parliament? We had it a lot more than you had. The first jab I had, the first AstraZeneca, nothing at all. The second one, I thought I was dying. I had to go to hospital. Came out with hives all over my body. I got, at 57, I got hay fever for the first time for a month, and I've had it ever since. But what I will say is all my symptoms are about now a fraction of what they were the year after I took the vaccine, second vaccine, and they're a lot less. My defence is they caught other people. I see Malhotra had 2 Pfizers. His dad died of the jet infections. Robert Malone is a friend of mine. He invented the mRNA technology. He took 2 Pfizers as well. He's vaccine harmed. He rang his colleagues where he retired from and said, after he'd taken the second shot, said, just tell me how you sorted out all the problems with the vaccines. And they said, what problems? And he realised they never had.
There were a lot of red flags about it.
There were, but I did not believe the government would actually seek to do that to us.
Yeah, a lot of us did, and we didn't take it.
I know, I'll give you a star. Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we could stay here all night and sort the world's problems out, but I've got to go and speak on an interview now. It's been an absolute pleasure.